Let me ask you something strange. Have you ever lived in a house where a door just felt wrong? Not haunted, not creaky, not even old, just off. Like the space behind it didn't belong to your home at all. That's what this story is about. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll finally understand why my wife always avoids the guest room, and why my son insists someone else lives in there. This isn't just another creepy story, this is personal. And you're going to see every moment, every piece of this mystery unravel right in front of you. If you've ever felt like something in your own home didn't add up, or that someone might be watching even when you're alone, then stick with me. Because what I'm about to tell you starts with a whisper behind a locked door, and ends with a truth that shattered everything I believed about my family. Now, I know how easy it is to scroll past videos like this. We all do it. But I need you to listen carefully. This isn't just a ghost story, or a paranormal tale made up for clicks. What happened in my house was real, tangible, and dangerous. I'm sharing this with you not just to get it off my chest, but because some part of you came looking for answers, right? That's why you clicked. That's why you're still here. So let me make a promise. By the end of the story, you'll know exactly what was hiding behind that door, and why my son still talks to someone we can't see. Okay, now take a deep breath and picture this. We moved into our new home a year ago. It was one of those beautiful old colonial-style houses that people in New England rave about. Wooden shutters, wraparound porch, creaking floorboards that make you feel like you're living in history. My wife, Allison, fell in love with it the second she saw the listing. It had 4 bedrooms, a sunroom, a fireplace, and one extra room tucked away in the far corner of the upstairs hall. We called it the guest room. We didn't think much of it at first. Just a spare space. But that's where things started to get uncomfortable. It began small. Harmless, really. Allison never went in there. Said the air felt too heavy. I laughed it off. I mean, we've all got our quirks, right? But then our 5-year-old son, Noah, started doing something strange. Every night, right before bed, he'd stop in the hallway and look at the guest room door. Just stare. Sometimes whisper. When I asked him who he was talking to, he'd say, "The man who stays in there." I thought maybe it was an imaginary friend, maybe he saw something in a cartoon, or maybe he was just being creative. But then came the noises. Footsteps. Light taps on the walls. Sometimes, the door would be cracked open just a bit when I was sure I had shut it tight the night before. My wife got more distant, quieter. She didn't sleep well, and she didn't want to talk about it. And any time I mentioned the guest room, she'd either brush it off or change the subject entirely. I chalked it up to stress. New home, new routines, young kid, it all adds up. But then something happened that shook me to my core. It was a Saturday night. Allison had taken Noah to her sister's place for the weekend, just for a break. I stayed back to catch up on work. Around midnight, I heard something upstairs. Not just a creak. Not a house settling. This was movement. Clear as day. Someone walking slowly across the upstairs hallway. My first thought? Maybe I forgot to lock the back door. Maybe someone broke in. So I grabbed a flashlight and crept up the stairs, every nerve in my body on edge. And when I turned the corner at the top, the guest room door was wide open. That door hadn't been opened in months. I always made sure it was shut. But that night, it was fully ajar, like someone had just walked in or out. And inside, I swear to you, there was a smell. Damp, earthy, like the basement of an old church. And the light bulb? Flickering. Even though I had replaced it just last week. That was the night I started recording everything. Look, I'm not trying to scare you for views. I'm not here to hype up shadows and make you believe in ghosts if you don't want to. But I do want you to listen. Because from here on out, things got worse. The more I tried to ignore it, the more the house fought back. My son began drawing pictures, unsettling ones, of a man with no eyes, just dark holes for sockets. He said that man told him secrets. Secrets he wasn't supposed to share with us. And my wife. One night, I found her just standing outside the guest room door. Not moving. Not speaking. Just staring. I had to shake her to snap her out of it. And when she looked at me, she didn't even seem to recognize who I was, not at first. You're probably wondering, why didn't we leave? Why didn't we get the place blessed or call a priest or get an exorcism or something? That's what any rational person would do, right? And I agree with you. But when something slowly takes root in your home, in your mind, you start doubting yourself before anything else. That's how this works. It's psychological. It's manipulative. And it feeds on disbelief. This story is about a hidden presence. Something that lived in the walls of our family, hidden in plain sight. And no matter how many times we tried to act normal, the guest room never let us forget that someone else was in our home. I'm going to tell you everything. The symbols I found carved into the floorboards. The night my son vanished for an hour and reappeared with no memory of where he'd been. The time I caught someone on our baby monitor even though no one else was home. And most importantly, what I discovered about my wife's past and why she already knew there was someone living in that room long before we moved in. But that's coming next, because right now I need you to understand. The guest room isn't just a room. It's a trap, a mirror, and it reflects what you try hardest to forget. I wasn't always the kind of person who believed in anything beyond what I could see or touch. I'm not superstitious, not really religious, and definitely not the type to call a psychic hotline or go ghost hunting. I'm just a regular guy, a freelance software developer with a tight schedule, a mortgage, and a family I'd do anything to protect. Maybe that's what made all of this harder to accept at first, because logic has always been my comfort zone. Numbers, code, clean answers. But lately, nothing in my life adds up anymore. Not since we moved here. Not since that guest room started acting like it had a mind of its own. Allison, my wife, has always been intuitive, more emotional, more sensitive to energy than I've ever been. She said the house felt off from day one, but I brushed it off as nerves. Still, I should have paid more attention. The signs were there. The first night we moved in, she insisted we sleep downstairs on the pull-out couch, even though the bedroom was ready. Said she didn't like the upstairs hallway at night. I thought she was being dramatic. Now, I wonder if she knew something, felt something I couldn't. We'd been distant for a while before the move, if I'm being honest. Nothing explosive, just that slow kind of drifting that sneaks up on you when work gets busy and parenting takes over. I figured the new house would be a fresh start. But it didn't bring us closer. It pushed us into different corners of our own reality. Noah, our son, started changing in small but noticeable ways. He used to be bubbly, full of endless, why questions and wild ideas. But a few weeks after we moved in, he got quieter, thoughtful, almost too mature for his age. He'd spend hours in his room drawing, not even cartoons or superheroes, just strange, abstract shapes, spirals, stick figures with no faces. At first, I chalked it up to transition anxiety or a new school adjustment, but then he started saying things that no 5-year-old should know. Talking about the man with no noise who visits him at night. When I asked what he meant by that, he said the man doesn't speak, he feels. Like his voice happens inside your head, not through words. That was the first time I felt genuine fear, not for myself, but for my son. I tried to research. I scoured forums, subreddits, anything that talked about haunted houses, childhood hallucinations, sleep paralysis, EMF exposure, you name it. I even reached out anonymously to a local Facebook group for parents in the area. Most people dismissed it. Kids have imaginary friends, they said. Perfectly normal. But one woman DM'd me privately. Her name was Meredith, and she said, "It's the house, not your son." That's all she wrote. No follow-up, no profile picture, no reply when I asked for more. Her message disappeared the next day. Deleted. Gone like it never existed. But I remember her name. At this point, the guest room had become completely off-limits to Allison. She refused to go near it. If something of Noah's rolled near the door, she'd ask me to get it. Once, I caught her praying outside it, whispering under her breath with a trembling voice, her eyes squeezed shut. She's not even religious. When I asked her what she was doing, she just said, "It's safer this way," and walked off like I hadn't said anything at all. That was the moment I realized there was something deeper going on, something Allison wasn't telling me. And for the first time in our marriage, I started to question whether I even knew the woman I had built a life with. Around the same time, strange things started happening with our electronics. My laptop would freeze at 3:03 a.m. every night if I left it on sleep mode. Our doorbell camera recorded blank clips, no motion, just the sound of faint breathing on the mic. Our smart speaker began playing lullabies on its own, even though we never set a playlist. I checked the logs, no triggers, no commands. When I brought it up to Allison, she barely reacted. Just said, "Don't give it attention. That's how it gets stronger."
It.
Not them. Not someone. That's when I knew she believed this wasn't a person, it was a thing. Something nameless. I started keeping a notebook. Not just because I wanted to document everything for proof, but because I needed to feel like I had some kind of control. That's what you do when your reality starts unraveling. You write it down piece by piece, hoping that somewhere in the mess, the logic will reveal itself. But the deeper I looked, the more tangled everything became. I found records of the previous owner, an elderly man named Charles Whitaker, who passed away 6 months before we bought the place. He had no family, no obituary, and almost no digital footprint, except for one blog post from years ago, where he mentioned strange visitors in the wall.
I thought it was nonsense at the time. Now?
I'm not so sure. The neighbors don't talk much, but the man across the street, Mr. Perry, once said something odd while we were trimming our hedges. He looked up at the house and said, "You're brave, buying that place. Most folks don't stay long after the first winter." When I asked him what he meant, he just smiled, shook his head, and mumbled, "The house remembers." He wouldn't elaborate no matter how many times I tried. That phrase has been stuck in my head ever since, the house remembers. The more I dig, the more people start acting strange around me. Like they know something I don't. Like they're keeping secrets, just like Allison. Even my best friend Marcus, who helped us move in, refuses to visit anymore. Said he had a dream about the guest room. Said it's not a dream you should wake up from. He won't explain what that means either. He won't even answer my calls now. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if something is haunting my family, or if we've all just gone crazy together. But I do know this, someone or something is living in that room. And it's not just a ghost. It's deeper than that. Older.
Smarter.
It's watching us, learning us. And I think it wants more than just to scare us. What I can't figure out is why Allison refuses to talk about it, what she's protecting, or who. And what my son meant when he said, "He's not just here at night anymore, Daddy. He's awake now." I'll tell you what happened the night I decided to finally open the door.
But not yet.
First, you need to know what I found in Allison's journal and why it changed everything I thought I knew about her, and about who this man in the guest room might really be. The journal wasn't where I left it. I know how that sounds, and I know how unreliable it seems. But I'm telling you, I had placed Allison's journal at the back of my office drawer, hidden beneath old tax papers, completely out of reach. She had no reason to go into that drawer. It was mine. The one place I kept my personal things, including the notes I'd been compiling, audio recordings from the baby monitor, and printouts from the forums I'd been following. But that morning, when I reached in to pull it out, ready to read through more of the entries, I found the drawer completely empty. The papers, the journal, everything I had been collecting over the past 2 weeks gone. Not misplaced. Not moved. Erased. Like it had never been there to begin with. I confronted Allison about it right away. She was in the kitchen, calmly pouring cereal for Noah like nothing had happened, humming some old tune I didn't recognize. I asked her if she'd seen anything from my office, and she just smiled, shook her head, and said, "Maybe you imagined keeping it there. Stress does that." The tone of her voice didn't sit right with me. It was too casual, too rehearsed. And then she said something I haven't been able to get out of my head since. Some doors don't open just because you knock, you know. Sometimes they stay shut for a reason. She said it like a warning. Like she wasn't talking about the guest room anymore, but about me. That was the moment I started to wonder if Allison was part of whatever was happening. If maybe, somehow, she wasn't just avoiding the guest room out of fear, but out of guilt. Maybe she wasn't just hiding from the thing inside. Maybe she was protecting it. Or protecting us from it. Either way, the idea that she might be actively working against me shook me more than anything I'd felt since this nightmare began. but I wasn't ready to give up. I had backed up some of my recordings online, stored them in a private cloud account. Late that night, while Allison and Noah were asleep, I logged in to retrieve one of the more disturbing audio files. It had been captured 2 nights prior, a low, whispering sound coming from the baby monitor in Noah's room, followed by what sounded like a slow dragging noise across the floor. But when I opened the folder, it was empty. Not corrupted. Not renamed. Deleted. I checked the access log. Someone had logged into my account from our IP address the night
before.
That confirmed it for me. Someone in this house was erasing my trail. Someone didn't want the truth getting out. I wanted to believe it was all coincidence. I really did. But the walls were closing in faster than I could push back. I started having memory gaps.
Short ones at first.
I'd look up at the clock and realize an hour had passed without me doing anything. Once, I woke up in the hallway with no idea how I got there. The guest room door cracked slightly open behind me, and a faint, cold breeze brushing against my back. The kind of cold that doesn't feel like air conditioning but like something dead. And then came the knock on the front door. It was just after sunset, and we weren't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a man standing there, mid-50s, weathered face, leather jacket, eyes sharp like he hadn't slept in years. He introduced himself as Graham, said he used to do home inspections in the area, and claimed he had worked on our property years ago when it was undergoing renovation. His name rang a bell. He was listed in the old paperwork buried in our closing documents. I invited him in. He didn't waste time. Sat down at the edge of the couch and said, "You've seen it by now, haven't you?" No context. No polite lead-up. Just that. He leaned in, elbows on his knees, and added, "It always starts with the kids. They're easier to reach." I didn't know whether to kick him out or ask him to tell me everything. He said there's a pattern. Families move in, start hearing noises, feeling watched, kids talk to people who aren't there. And always, the house finds one person to use. Someone close. Someone trusted. I asked him what that meant, and he paused, like he wasn't sure if he should go further. Then he said, "It's not the room. It's what was done in the room. That space was never meant to hold peace. Only punishment." He stood up, looked toward the hallway where the guest room was, and muttered, "You don't just live here now, you're part of it." Before I could ask more, he was already walking out. I followed him to the porch, but he was gone. No car. No sound. Just vanished into the dusk. When I checked the security footage later that night, there was no record of anyone at the door. Nothing. Just static between 6:17 and 6:43 p.m., the exact window when he had supposedly arrived and left. The timestamp even glitched for a few frames. I don't know what freaked me out more. The fact that he might not have existed, or the fact that he did, and someone had wiped the proof. I'm starting to lose sleep. The lines between what's real and what's planted are starting to blur. My conversations with Allison feel strained, like she's speaking from script. And Noah, he barely talks anymore. He just watches me. Sometimes I'll catch him standing outside the guest room with his head slightly tilted, like he's listening to something I can't hear. One night, I asked him what he was doing, and he looked up at me with this strange expression, like he felt sorry for me and said, "You're not supposed to open it yet."
Yet.
That word keeps echoing in my mind. Like there's a countdown I can't see, a moment that hasn't arrived but will, and when it does, nothing will be the same. But what scares me the most isn't what's waiting behind that door. It's what Allison might have done before we ever moved here. Because earlier today, I found something she had hidden in the attic crawlspace, wrapped in a garbage bag, taped shut, buried under an old box of baby clothes we haven't touched since Noah was a toddler. Inside was a set of house keys. Not to our current place. To somewhere else entirely. A rental property 3 towns over. With a different name listed on the lease. Not hers. Not mine. And here's the part that makes my blood run cold. The lease ended the exact same week we moved in. I haven't confronted her yet. I don't know if I should. Because something tells me she's not the only one hiding something. I didn't sleep the night I found those keys. I sat on the floor of the attic with the garbage bag in my lap, staring at the lease agreement like it might rearrange itself into something less damning. But the facts stared back with stubborn clarity. The address, the lease dates, and the name on the tenant line. Lena Whitaker. That last name hit me like a slap. Whitaker. The same last name as the man who owned our house before us. The one who had supposedly died, without family. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I didn't know Allison had any connection to the Whitakers, and she certainly never mentioned living in another house just before we moved here. What was she doing in that other place? Why use a different name? And why bury the evidence like it was a crime scene? By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to ask her about it. Not yet. Instead, I called Marcus. Even though he had been ignoring my messages for weeks, I needed someone else to see the lease. Someone who could tell me I was either spiraling out of control or onto something I wasn't supposed to find. To my surprise, he answered. His voice was hoarse, flat, like he hadn't spoken to anyone in a while. When I mentioned the Whitaker name, he went dead silent. After a pause, he finally said, "You need to come over.
Now.
Bring the paper. Don't say anything else on the phone." Then he hung up. That drive felt endless. When I pulled up to his place, the blinds were drawn. The porch light was off even though it was still broad daylight, and the front door was already cracked open. He met me in the living room, eyes bloodshot, unshaven, twitchy in a way I'd never seen him before. He didn't waste time with small talk. I handed him the lease, and as soon as he saw the name, his hands started to shake. Then, without a word, he walked over to his bookshelf, reached behind a row of old vinyl records, and pulled out a yellowed manila envelope. He didn't explain where it came from. He just handed it to me. Inside were photos.
Dozens of them.
Some were of the old Whitaker house, taken years ago, long before our time. But others were of my family. Blurry shots of us unloading boxes on move-in day. Me mowing the lawn. Allison on the porch swing. One photo was taken through a window, clearly from outside the house, and showed Noah asleep in bed, curled up with his favorite blanket. That one made me physically ill. I flipped through the rest, heart racing, and then found the one that nearly dropped me to my knees. It was a photo of me, standing in the attic, holding the garbage bag. Taken last night. I demanded to know where he got them. His answer terrified me more than the photos themselves. He said someone had mailed the envelope to him a month ago. No return address, no note, just a simple warning scrawled on the flap in black marker. "You're already inside." At the time, Marcus said he thought it was a prank, maybe even some twisted message from a stalker or hacker. But then he started noticing patterns. Things moved around his house. His dog wouldn't go near the back bedroom. And at night, he kept dreaming of a staircase that didn't exist in his home, but looked eerily familiar to the one in my hallway. He hadn't told me any of this because he didn't want to believe it. And now, with the lease in hand, he was sure we were part of something bigger. Something orchestrated. Something that started long before we ever stepped foot in that house. That's when he pulled out his phone and showed me the last voicemail he received before cutting off contact with me. It was from a blocked number. The message was just breathing at first, deep, slow, deliberate. Then, a voice whispered, barely audible over the static, "You opened the door when you married her." That sentence hit harder than anything I'd heard so far. My mind reeled with implications. Was Allison just caught in this like I was, or had she led me into it? Was the guest room something she had always known about? Or worse, had she brought it with her? The secrets, the rental house, the erased journal, the missing evidence, it all started pointing in the same direction. But before I could process any of it, Marcus said something that made my stomach twist. I recognized the handwriting on that envelope. He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out an old greeting card. Something from a Christmas years back. It was from Allison. The same sharp slant. The same lowercase, E, with a loop that crossed into the next letter. Identical. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, or that maybe someone was imitating her writing to mess with us, but deep down I knew that was a lie. There were too many overlapping threads now. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, might be the very reason this thing has its grip on us.
But it didn't end there.
As I left Marcus's place, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. The guest room door, wide open, with a shadow standing just beyond the threshold. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 minutes ago while I was out, while Allison and Noah were home alone. I called her immediately. No answer. I raced back, ignoring speed limits, cutting red lights, barely breathing. But when I got home, the house was silent. Too silent. Allison and Noah were safe, sitting on the couch, calm as ever, watching a cartoon like nothing had happened. The guest room door?
Closed. Locked.
No sign of entry. And when I showed Allison the text, she looked at me like I'd lost my mind. There's nothing in there, she said. There never was.
But I know what I saw.
And now I'm starting to believe maybe I was never supposed to find any of this. Maybe the guest room isn't what's cursed. Maybe I am. And there's one more thing. When I checked my phone again that night, the photo was gone. Not deleted. Not moved. Just never there. Every instinct in me screamed that something was wrong, but I pushed it aside, telling myself Allison and Noah were safe. The normal sounds of the TV, Noah's laughter, Allison's soft humming, these were the anchors I clung to. But deep inside, a cold pit had settled in my stomach, the kind of unease that makes your skin crawl even when everything looks fine on the surface. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, eyes darting to every shadow, every creak, every sound that normally would have gone unnoticed. I kept checking my phone, hoping for some clue, some message to explain what was happening, or who was sending those photos. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, a text appeared, clear and direct. You're running out of time. No sender. No number. Just those chilling words. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, the weight of the message pressing down on me like a physical blow. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a glitch. This was a warning. And it wasn't the first. I decided I couldn't wait anymore. I grabbed the keys to my car and slipped out into the cool night air, heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the whole neighborhood. I needed answers. I needed to know who was behind all of this before it was too late. But the streets were empty, and the silence felt oppressive. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me, but every time I turned around, there was nothing. Just the soft rustling of leaves in the dark. That's when I noticed the car. A black sedan, its engine idling 2 houses down, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I sped up, then slowed, trying to shake the feeling of being watched, but no matter what I did, the car followed. My phone died suddenly, a total blackout, right when I tried to call Allison. The radio fizzled into static, and the streetlights flickered, plunging me into brief moments of near darkness. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to stay calm, gripping the steering wheel tighter and telling myself it was just coincidence, paranoia, maybe a late-night neighbor or someone heading home. But I knew better. When I finally made it back to the house, headlights from that same car were parked just down the street. No one was inside, or at least no one moved. I couldn't tell if they were waiting, watching, or just lurking. I pulled into the driveway and locked the doors, but the feeling didn't leave. It was like the house had grown eyes, and the eyes were watching me. The next morning, everything changed. Noah was gone. Allison claimed she last saw him before breakfast, playing in his room, but now the house felt hollow, echoes of silence filling the space where my son's laughter used to be. I searched every corner, every closet, every inch of that cursed house, but he was nowhere. The front door was locked from the inside, windows shut tight. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the garden, no notes left behind. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I wanted to scream, to break down, to beg for answers. But the only thing I could do was call the police, who took my statement with a mix of sympathy and skepticism. A missing child without a trace, every parent's worst nightmare. Yet no leads, no clues, just silence. And then, an officer pulled me aside, quietly warning me to be careful about digging too deep into the Whitaker history, saying some old family secrets were best left buried. The implication was clear. My search was stirring up things that others wanted to stay hidden. That night, I sat alone in the dark, the guest room door wide open in front of me, the cold air seeping out like a breath from some unseen presence. I tried to shut it, to lock it, but the handle felt icy, almost alive, slipping from my grasp like it was resisting. I was exhausted, broken, and terrified, not just for Noah, but for my own sanity. The lines between what was real and what was imagined blurred more every minute. Faces in the shadows seemed to watch me, whispers followed me through the halls, and I wondered if I was losing myself in a nightmare from which I'd never wake. Somewhere deep inside, I realized the truth was more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't just fighting a mystery. I was fighting something that wanted to break me completely. And the worst part? I still don't know if I'm alone in this house, or if the ones I trust most are part of the secret keeping me trapped in this nightmare. The guest room waits. Noah is out there somewhere, and the clock is ticking. Just when I thought I was at the edge of losing everything, the last thread of hope slipping through my fingers, I got a call that turned everything upside down. It was Allison. Her voice was shaky but firm, and she told me to come to the old rental property she'd hidden from me all along. The place with the Whitaker name on the lease, the one I never knew she'd lived in before we moved into the house. My heart pounded with a mixture of dread and relief. Maybe Noah was there. Maybe Allison finally wanted to tell me the truth. But what she revealed when I arrived shattered all my assumptions. The house was empty, dust thick on the floor, but in the dim light of the living room, Allison handed me a thick folder filled with papers and photos. She said that Charles Whitaker, the man who once owned our house, wasn't just some reclusive old man. He was her father. Her real father. She'd kept it a secret because the truth was tangled with things darker than I ever imagined. Allison confessed that years ago, before we met, she discovered strange symbols carved in the guest room walls and had tried to escape that house and family history, but the past had a way of dragging her back, and now it had dragged us all into its shadows. She told me Noah wasn't missing because of some supernatural force or a malevolent spirit. It was the family curse, a legacy passed down through bloodlines, a secret protection ritual gone wrong. The guest room was never just a room. It was a prison designed to hold something inside their lineage, something dangerous that could only be kept at bay through sacrifices and silence. Allison's silence was a shield. She was trying to protect Noah from the family's darkness and me from knowing the full extent of what we were up against. I felt betrayed, angry, terrified. How could she keep this from me? And yet, part of me understood. The weight of generations of secrets, the fear that if I knew everything, I might not be able to protect us. But the most shocking part was still to come. Allison handed me a small, folded letter written in her mother's handwriting, a woman I'd never met, who disappeared mysteriously when Allison was a child. The letter warned that someone close to us was not who they appeared to be, that trust was a dangerous gamble. And then, just as I was processing all of this, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Marcus. Only it wasn't his voice in the voicemail. It was the same chilling whisper I had heard before. You opened the door when you married her. Suddenly, everything changed. Marcus wasn't just a friend. He was part of the secret. Part of the reason we were trapped. And the mystery wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about who I could trust at all. The lines between friend and foe, past and present, reality and nightmare had blurred completely, and I was left wondering if escaping the truth was even possible. Because the guest room didn't just hold a secret, it held a truth that might destroy us all. The weight of Allison's confession crushed me in a way I hadn't expected. Suddenly, every smile, every word, every moment we had shared was tinted with this secret she'd carried alone for so long. I was drowning in questions, but there was no time to ask them all, not when the line between ally and enemy was dissolving faster than I could process. Marcus's voicemail replayed in my head like a broken record. You opened the door when you married her. That phrase felt like a sentence I couldn't escape, and it forced me to face a truth I'd been avoiding. Someone I trusted, someone I thought was on my side, had been part of this nightmare all along. The idea that Marcus might have been working against me, that he knew more about Allison's past and the family curse than he let on, cut deep.
It felt like a knife twisting inside my chest.
I had to confront him. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed to understand if there was any part of my life I could still trust. I arranged to meet him at a coffee shop, trying to hold myself together while every fiber of my being screamed to run the other way. When he arrived, his usual easy smile was gone, replaced by a guarded expression that sent chills down my spine. As soon as we sat, he leaned in, eyes dark and unreadable, and said, "You don't understand what you're up against. This isn't just about a haunted house or a missing kid. It's about survival." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and said, "There are things you can't change. Things that don't care about truth or justice. And if you keep digging, you'll lose everything, your family, your sanity, maybe even your life." His words were a warning and a threat all at once, and I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could walk away, leave the past buried, protect what little peace I had left, and pretend none of this ever happened. Or I could keep fighting no matter the cost. But the cost wasn't just mine to pay anymore. Noah was gone. Allison was hiding more than she could say. And Marcus, my oldest friend, was hiding something darker than I ever imagined. The ultimatum crushed me like a tidal wave. Marcus told me that if I wanted my family back, if I wanted to find Noah alive, I had to stop searching. I had to stop asking questions. He claimed that the family curse wasn't a story. It was a pact, a cycle of sacrifices and silence that kept something locked away in that guest room. Breaking it could unleash horrors no one was prepared to face. But surrendering meant living with the unknown, with the loss, with the fear that whatever was in that room was still there, waiting. I looked into Allison's eyes later that night, searching for any sign of hope or guidance, but all I found was exhaustion and pain. She told me she never wanted this life, that she tried to shield me and Noah from the darkness for years, but that the past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you run. I wanted to scream at her for keeping secrets, for hiding the truth, but I couldn't, because underneath all the mystery and fear, there was still love, a desperate, broken love that made the impossible choices even harder. I'm trapped in a nightmare where every decision feels like a gamble with no winning hand. Do I protect my family by walking away from the truth, or do I risk everything to uncover it? And even if I choose the latter, how do I face the possibility that the people I trusted the most are part of the reason this nightmare exists? The guest room door stands closed tonight, but I know it won't stay that way forever. The shadows are moving closer, the secrets pressing down, and the clock is ticking faster than ever. I'm running out of time, running out of options, and maybe running out of hope. But one thing is certain, whatever choice I make next, nothing will ever be the same again. I thought I was alone in this nightmare, battling shadows and secrets that haunted just my family. But as the days blurred into sleepless nights, I discovered the truth was far bigger, darker, and more twisted than I ever imagined. The whispers I'd heard, the strange glances from neighbors, the cryptic warnings, it wasn't just my story anymore.
It was a network.
A conspiracy woven through the very fabric of this town, rooted in generations of silence and betrayal. It started with a call from Allison's sister, someone I didn't even know existed until a week ago. She reached out in desperation, her voice trembling with fear, saying that she too had been warned to stay quiet, to leave the past buried. But she couldn't. She told me that Allison's family wasn't just connected to the Whitaker curse, they were central to it, guardians of a secret society that had been protecting the house's dark legacy for decades. She claimed the guest room was a prison, not for a ghost, but for a force so old and malevolent that entire families had sacrificed everything to keep it locked away. Then came the betrayal. Marcus. I never saw it coming until the moment I caught him standing in the shadows of my own kitchen, cold and unreadable. His eyes weren't the eyes of a friend. They were calculating, distant, and full of something I couldn't name. He confessed that he had been part of the society too, tasked with keeping me from unraveling the truth, because once the secret was out, the balance would collapse. Noah wasn't missing by accident. He had been taken as part of a ritual to strengthen the prison's hold, to keep the darkness from spilling out into the world. Marcus said it like it was a fact of life, something necessary and unchangeable. When I asked why he never told me, why he pretended to be on my side, he just shrugged, because some sacrifices are personal. And you were never meant to be part of this. My world shattered. In that instant, everything I had believed about friendship, love, and trust crumbled. The conspiracy wasn't just about a haunted house. It was about control, power, and an ancient force that fed on fear and secrecy. More people were involved than I could count: neighbors, local officials, even people I passed on the street without a second thought. Allison's silence, Marcus's betrayal, Noah's disappearance, it was all a piece of a chilling puzzle that was far from complete. The clock was running out. I could feel the pressure mounting with every breath. The house itself seemed to pulse with a life of its own, every creak and whisper a reminder that the darkness was waiting for its chance. I knew now that confronting the truth meant facing enemies on all sides, some hidden behind familiar faces, others lurking in the shadows beyond. I stood at the edge of a precipice, knowing the next step could destroy everything or maybe, just maybe, save my family. But the stakes had never been higher, and the cost of failure was unimaginable. The guest room door was no longer just a barrier, it was a threshold between safety and oblivion. And as the night closed in, I realized that in this deadly game of secrets and lies, no one was truly innocent, and no one could be trusted. The night I decided to face the guest room once and for all, the air in the house was thick with a silence that felt suffocating. I stood at the threshold, the worn wooden door looming before me like a challenge I could no longer avoid. Every nerve screamed to run, to hide, but I couldn't. Noah was inside, or at least whatever was left of him, and the truth demanded to be confronted. Allison's words echoed in my mind. This wasn't just a room. It was a prison, a battleground for something ancient and relentless, and I was about to become its latest player. With a deep breath, I grasped the cold brass doorknob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, the walls covered in those same twisted symbols Allison had mentioned, glowing faintly in the dim light as if alive. The air was thick with something metallic and sweet, like blood mixed with decay. My eyes struggled to adjust, but then I saw him.
Noah.
Or a version of him. He sat in the corner, eyes hollow and distant, whispering words that weren't his own, speaking in a voice older than time. And standing behind him was Marcus, the friend I once trusted, now revealed as the guardian of this nightmare, his face grim, his purpose clear. "You shouldn't have come here," Marcus said, voice low but cold as steel. "This place doesn't forgive mistakes." I felt a surge of anger and desperation. "Give me my son." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Noah isn't the boy you knew. He's the key to keeping this darkness locked away. If you take him now, you unleash chaos." The room seemed to close in on me, shadows flickering as if alive, moving closer, whispering ancient curses. I realized then that this wasn't just a physical fight, it was a battle for souls. I had to reach Noah before the darkness consumed him completely. "Fight it, Noah," I whispered, stepping forward. His eyes flickered with recognition, a brief spark of the son I loved. But the darkness fought back, and the room twisted violently. Walls pulsed, and the symbols burned brighter, forcing me to the ground. Marcus moved swiftly, chanting in a language I couldn't understand, reinforcing the prison. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, knowing that if I failed, the curse would spread beyond these walls. Desperation gave me strength, and I lunged toward Noah, grabbing his small hand just as the room began to collapse in on itself. For a moment, the whispers stopped. Noah's eyes cleared, and he smiled weakly. Then everything shattered. I woke up outside the house alone. The door sealed shut behind me as if it had never been opened. Noah was gone. Allison was nowhere to be found. My phone buzzed with one final message. The cycle continues. I realized then the horrifying truth, that this was bigger than me, bigger than any one family. The darkness wasn't trapped in the guest room. It was inside us all, waiting for the next door to open. And as I looked up, a shadow moved in the distance, a new figure watching, waiting. the nightmare wasn't over. It had just begun. Weeks have passed since that night when the guest room swallowed Noah and Allison disappeared like a ghost into the shadows. I've moved out of that house, left behind the creaking floors and the secrets carved into the walls, trying to rebuild a life shattered by a darkness I still don't fully understand. The town whispers about the place. Neighbors cross the street to avoid it. Stories swirl about the cursed Whitaker legacy, and I'm left with memories that haunt every quiet moment. But somehow, amidst the chaos and the loss, I found a fragile kind of peace. It's not the peace I dreamed of, a family reunited, a normal life, but peace in accepting that some mysteries might never be solved, some doors meant to remain closed. The house still stands, its windows staring blankly like empty eyes, waiting for the next chapter to begin, the next soul to step inside and face the unknown. I carry with me the weight of everything, the betrayal, the love, the sacrifices, reminders that sometimes the darkest truths don't come with neat endings, but with lessons etched deep into the heart. And as I look at the world now, I realize that fear isn't always about what lurks in the shadows, but what we carry inside ourselves. The doubt, the guilt, the question of who we really are when the lights go out. So, if you've been watching, if you've felt that chill running down your spine, remember this. Some stories don't end. They echo, they linger, they twist into the corners of your mind long after the screen goes dark. Because the real mystery isn't the haunted room or the missing child. It's the part of us that wonders if we're ever truly safe, or if the shadows are just waiting for us to look away.